you don't understand what you're better at than your competitors and how you're serving your chosen customer base better, like all the other execution you do is just not going to have as big an impact.
If I could go back in my lifetime and say, what's a big mistake? I wish I figured this out earlier.
Ask questions, ask why.
It takes a special leader to help you grow in a certain role.
Doesn't matter how I speak, doesn't matter how I look.
And it holds true as you think big and don't let anybody stop you.
Now that's a success story.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for this episode of Success Stories. Today I have a special guest, Pete Caputa, the CEO of Databox. Pete, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Steve. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So where we start out, I know you're not super familiar with the podcast, but where we start out, the first question I always ask is, when you think back of your success story and what led you to where you're currently at, where does that story begin for you?
Oof. It's a tough one. Tough one. How far has someone gone back?
You know what? I've had people go back all the way to childhood, and they talk very strongly about their father or their mother and their upbringing, and that's where it started ingrained with them. Some people just start like with their first boss almost. So it's kind of all over the map.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, I don't know where to start. I got to give props to your parents, I guess. Now that you brought it up.
Yeah, right. If not, you can't have them watch it.
We weren't very important. Yeah. So I was definitely got a good pick of the lottery with my family for sure. My parents. I was the oldest of three, and then also the oldest of is it like 12 cousins on one side and like 30 cousins on the other side. The second oldest for 30 cousins. So I had a lot of parental figures. My grandparents were young, and some of my aunts and uncles are only a few years older than me, so like 10 years older or so. So I had a lot of fathering and mothering. So definitely had plenty of support growing up. But as far as like where my success story career-wise probably started, would be at HubSpot. I joined HubSpot really early on as the 15th employee. Before that, I had studied chemical engineering. Started a startup with a bunch of buddies where we built a web app. I had worked at a manufacturing company for about 6 years doing different cool stuff, but was never really passionate about it. Was passionate, of course, about my startup, but struggled with that. Like we did that for a handful of years and kind of broke even with it, but never really made it into a business. So when I joined HubSpot, I didn't realize, but I was joining a startup that would go on to do very well. At 15. At the 15th employee mark, there was very little figured out at that point. I'd actually met the VP of sales who hired me like a year before, when they were like really just like trying to figure out what the hell they're doing, and actually fed them a few customers from my own client base that because what I was doing was complementary. So yeah, that would definitely be the start of that. And I went on to be to build out the HubSpot channel program there. So in the beginning, mostly marketing agencies joining to so that they could use the software to sell inbound marketing retainers at the time. And now it's 40% of HubSpot's revenue. So along the way, I went from manager to director to VP and managed a really large team. Worked with marketing and sales and service to build out the program. So that was a good ride.
Yeah. It's a natural progression that I hear all the time, chemical engineering going into marketing. So I can just, you follow the same path that everybody else went into.
Actually went back to school
funny.
while I was working as an engineer. It was this is the .com bubble. And the company that I was working at, like every company in the world, was afraid that e-commerce was going to disrupt them. And so they realized, we have to have an e-commerce store to sell our products. Upon reflection, it was the stupidest idea ever, because most of the products were custom spec'd for most of the customers, and the products went through a distributor who was willing to finance the inventory for the client. And us, like, doing e-commerce was not the smartest thing, but
right.
But once we launched the site, we had hired like 2 consultants, and I was the product expert on the project. The VP of IT came over to me. He's like, "What are you gonna do now?" I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" He's like, "Why don't you go learn how to code so you can manage this thing and improve things?" I'm like, "Okay." So I had signed up for like a 9-month intensive like 12-hour a week course and learned how to code.
Mhm.
That's what got me
Wow.
started then on my startup.
Over there. Yeah, yeah. So what was the catalyst? What was that stimulus to make you make the leap to go back into entrepreneurship and leave HubSpot? Because I mean, employee number 15, but there was probably I wouldn't know even how to guess how many employees there were once you jump ship.
Yeah, there was a
But
few thousand left.
yeah, I would guess.
So the company got big. I'm definitely an entrepreneur at heart. I like innovating, figuring things out. I'm not saying HubSpot didn't continue to be innovative. They have, but
Mhm.
but it was more I guess sanctioned innovation than anything. And so I was looking for something entrepreneurial and had my own ideas on things and wanted to do that, wanted to go out and do it. So I was going to start something. I had started talking to investors, and one of the investors I was talking to said, "Hey, you got to meet this team." They had raised money early. And then their first attempt at going to market didn't go well, but they slimmed the team down to the engineering team, product and engineering team, and they pivoted, and like the pivot was into the market that I was familiar with, and it was similar product to what I wanted to build anyway. So I ended up joining as the CEO. The founder was looking for somebody to come in and help him run the
Gotcha,
business.
gotcha. Excellent, excellent. So what's your day to day look like today now?
No day is the same.
Right?
uh,
Well, that's the great part, right? That's why we do it.
yeah. I have I have a person that's like functioning as a CRO. I haven't officially given him the title. After he hears this, he's going to ask for it probably. But that's
Yeah, and race.
functioning as a CRO, managing marketing, sales, and customer success. And the founder manages product, engineering, HR, and finance. So I'm fairly freed up to innovate and do things, to try to move the business forward. So of course, I have, finance and legal and operational things that I have to be involved in. Certainly involved in, setting strategy and helping us come up with our annual plan and reviewing progress on initiatives and stuff like that. But in my spare time, I try to help out in 3 different areas. One is with our public thought leadership and marketing. So I publish a lot on LinkedIn. I go on a decent
Yeah,
amount of podcasts. I interview people on our podcast occasionally as well. So doing that kind of stuff, trying to get our message and our viewpoints out into the world. That's one of them. Number 2 is I work pretty closely with our partner team. So we have solutions partners at Databox. I still do that 9 years later. But at Databox, where they resell our product. They tend to be RevOps firms, business consultants, some
mm,
OKR consultants now, since we're just about to launch OKR software. And then the third thing I help with is more strategic partnerships. So we have some partnerships that we have and that we're enhance or expanding upon with other software companies. So other software companies that complement us. So
gotcha.
doing as much of that external stuff that I can to help move the business forward.
And how is it being the CEO when it sounds like you probably work side by side, not every day, but at least some of the time with the founder? How is that? Is it some good friction? I'm assuming because there's always some conflict, right? But
Great. Yeah.
how's that been?
Well, it's been 9 years and we haven't divorced yet, so it's okay. Yeah. We complement each other fairly well. He's very ambitious and aggressive. Not that I'm not, but he is like at another level of ambition. So he pushes us all to go farther faster, which definitely creates friction. I'm much more of a, hey, let's be thoughtful about what we're gonna do and what we're gonna prioritize, and let's make as good a bets as we can on what will work, what we think will work. So we balance each other out that way. But it's definitely a friction point. Um,
Yeah,
my experience is much more, although I have an engineering degree and I've coded before, I haven't touched code in forever. So I generally don't get too involved in how the product gets built. And he's very good at that, especially on the UI UX side, and so I might defer to him. He defers to me a bit more on the sales and marketing partnership stuff, which is, where I've spent the last 20 years of my career. So we have a good balance, I think. We have an operating system that we've built. It's not like we invented every piece of it, but we have an operating
Mhm.
system that we built that we really stick to, in terms of annual planning, quarterly reviews, and monthly, check-ins on performance and things like that.
Gotcha.
So it
So,
works.
what's the when you joined on as CEO? What were some nobody likes admitting this, but we all had them. What are some
Mhm.
failures or some aha moments where you're like, oh man, I wasn't ready for this situation, or I thought I thought I was ready, or I wasn't well equipped, or I didn't have the experience, because sometimes it's just experience and just
Yeah, yeah,
gaining that. Were
yeah.
there any of those moments for you?
Yeah, so we've largely bootstrapped the business.
Mhm.
They had about 800K in the bank when I joined, and then I raised $1 million when I joined from other smaller investors. And it was like $5,000 of monthly revenue, so it was like $60,000 of annual revenue at that point. So there was really no revenue. And we're 9 years in, and we haven't raised any additional, dilutive capital. We've done some revenue-based loans, which are available to SaaS companies, but beyond that, we haven't really raised any capital. So that's been hard. It's hard
Yeah.
to it's hard to grow because like we have those ambitions, right? But it's hard to grow and still manage cost.
Mm.
There's been a few times where we've like over invested ahead of growth, and had to pull back on costs. So that's painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more painful for the people that we have to let go, of course, but it's painful for me and for the org
Yeah.
and all. So
Culture.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the hard one. I had never had to do that myself. We had we had cut headcount at HubSpot a few times, but it was generally small course corrections. It was usually because there were some part of the business wasn't working as well as we thought, and so we scaled back on that part. But in general,
Yeah.
HubSpot was pretty steady growth, so that's
Yeah.
been a challenge. Yeah.
What are your best assets that you think you brought to the table as a CEO over the last 9 years, and how you've helped to leverage and lead?
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of the experience I had at HubSpot has been relevant. Here, the marketing stuff, that I learned, both tactically and strategic stuff that I learned at
Hmm.
HubSpot, just or maybe did at HubSpot, right? Really understanding, really knowing how to understand the needs of a segment of the customer base and get to what people will pay for. Like early on at Databox, I kind of did that with the team. It was a small team. They weren't talking to a lot of customers. They weren't really testing the market. And so that first, I'd say 6, 9 months where I did that over and over again with hundreds of new prospects and customers, like that definitely gave us our first, 5, 6 years of growth.
Hmm.
I'd say that would be something early on. Another thing is like I think a lot of entrepreneurs like to move from one thing to the next, but they often forget like that once they figure something out, they have to like institutionalize it and keep it going, or maybe scale it.
Yeah.
And so the thing I've pushed the team on is like, once you figure something out, it needs to be a process. The people that do the work need to own the process. Process enables measurement, which enables optimization, which enables correlations, which enables forecasting and modeling. So to bring that rigor, or at least that process, I'm not the most
Process.
rigorous
Yeah.
person myself, but bringing that process to the company so that we could execute that.
Is that do you think that leans into like your engineering and the analytical background?
Yeah, I definitely think like an engineer. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like trained that way, right? It's like everything's a system. Actually, because we bootstrapped, like we couldn't just go and build all the functions in the business. We had to kind of do them one at a time. And so the way I thought about it is like we're gonna build one function, maybe two functions at a time. And now we're about 10 million ARR business, and we have almost all of the go-to market functions that I would consider, say, a 50 or $100 million company has.
Mm.
We go to market through multiple channels: proactive outbound prospecting, inbound content marketing, partner. We have an SDR team, sales team. We have an onboarding team. We have a sales engineering team. Like we have all these functions built, but we didn't in the beginning, of course.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
as we went. So I think but thinking through like what do you build first, second, and how do you make sure that that's stable before you move on to the next thing, and dividing roles so that you can have efficiency, or sometimes combining them so you can have customer coverage or whatever. So yeah, definitely a engineering approach to building an org.
For sure, for sure. Well, to go from in 9 years, 60,000 to 10 million is kind of a it's kind of a hockey stick, right? What was the major year catalyst or time where that did
It was
escalate
it's
for you?
been extremely linear for us.
Really?
Yeah, it's not
Really?
hockey stick. Yeah, and that's actually like it's slow for a software company. Maybe not slow for a bootstrap software company, but
Hmm.
I think, if you compare it to other SaaS companies, like they've grown significantly faster. I think compared to a typical company, and yeah, that's great. You went from
Yeah.
0 to 10 million in
Well,
nine
the
years.
other companies have private equity, so that they can just throw a ton of cash at it. But so I guess that kind of makes sense for you guys of sustained growth and just incremental, right?
Yeah, we've tried to swing big. But I think sometimes the swings work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they work
Yeah.
better, or they're worse. So we over the years we've taken swings like this. Over this last year, we really went from like what most people would consider just a dashboard tool that you use to monitor higher level metrics, to more of a business intelligence tool where you can do analysis and start to understand cause and effect, start to predict what future outcomes might be, et cetera. So
Yeah.
so that's been a transition. That was a big swing. We invested a whole lot in
Yeah,
that.
I know you guys have already invested in it, but I'm assuming it's probably still on the forecast of diving deeper in with BI and AI, right?
Oh yeah, there's always more to do. Yes, yeah, yeah. So we've rolled out a lot of the back end capabilities to enable really hardcore analysis, and we're doing more things now to help users implement it, because our customer base is an enterprise. Our best customers are kind of
Yeah,
mid-sized businesses, and so they're not used to analysis. They're not used to working with raw data, which is what analysis requires. So we're doing things to make it a lot easier to set up and a lot easier to get those insights out. And AI is definitely playing a role in that, both in
yeah.
terms of like taking the raw data and turning it into metrics and visualizations, and then also interpreting that, interpreting and identifying.
Marketer friendly, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're trying
Yeah,
to get there.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You mentioned inbound, outbound efforts, and I know the HubSpot, the inbound methodology that they kind of paved the way for, and they blended in SEO. What works best for you guys with your acquisition? Is it inbound, outbound? Which kind of channel works best
Uh,
for you?
yeah, so inbound has definitely been the driver. In fact, I'd
Yeah.
say for the first 7 years, so up until about a year and a half ago, SEO was like drove like 90+% of our new business. We had a really aggressive on-site content marketing approach. We had a very small team, a few people, and that's what really got us to where we are. About a year and a half ago, I think, like most content marketers, our search traffic started dropping as a result of the way Google has started delivering answers instead of blue links, and then people adopting ChatGPT and other tools for search. So our search traffic has dropped because a lot of that content we were writing was educational content that brought the right visitor into our site. And that's really been absorbed.
Yeah.
That content's been
Very
absorbed.
top of the funnel stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we still get lots of traffic of people looking for our product. And I think that's to some degree a byproduct of all the content marketing we've done. And because we have lots of inbound links, a lot of citations. So I think we have good credibility both in Google's and then the other LLMs. So yeah, SEO is in search. We're definitely the drivers. Over the last year or so, we've gotten a lot more aggressive with social publishing across LinkedIn and YouTube, especially, but
Mhm.
Facebook, Instagram is also a driver. And then also doing a lot to try to just engage our audience in content marketing, in webinars. Like we have like these webinars where we have 50 people on the call and we do breakout rooms and we come back and share what we learned in the breakout room. So there's a lot of things that we try to do to engage people
Yeah.
in dialogue around uh, the themes that we want to get out there so that people are more in tune or attuned to trying our product. And that's a big driver for us. When I look at our self-reported attribution, social media is, when I add it up, it's like high 20% of our signups now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And
That's
for
really
anyone
high.
that doesn't know what self-report attribution is, we basically just ask people on the form, where did you first hear about us? And they have to type it in. I'm sure you know, but and so yeah, it's really high. And then and so like that's like a third of our signups. And then when I group like repeat customers and referrals or word of mouth, that's like a third. And then SEO and ads are like a third. If I had to break it up
Gotcha.
real, right? So
Easy category. Yeah.
so yeah, I say inbound is still a big portion of our reason for
Yeah.
being able
Well,
to
there's still
grow.
value in it, right? It might not be 90% of your acquisition channel, but
Yeah.
even a third is still it's still a
Oh,
decent
but
heavy
I kind
heavy
of
mix.
incorporate like everything into inbound. Sort of like
Yeah.
I look at maybe I'm taking a too expansive view of inbound. I get that people think of it differently, but yeah, the classic inbound is you write blog posts and you build landing pages and you optimize the blog post for search and you get search traffic. But I think if you think about inbound as like putting content out there and connecting with people and doing like community, like you're not forcing them down your funnel, you're not pitching them cold, and so it's still kind of directionally at least inbound. So I'd
Yeah.
say it's still like 60%, but it's just shifted more towards social media as opposed
Gotcha.
to search.
So,
Outbound is still pretty new for us. We've always done some level of outbound, but it's generally reaching out to people, offering access to market research that we've done, or asking them to contribute to that market research. So that's what kind of fills the top of our funnel. And then the channel, my VP or CRO, VP of sales, just pinged me and said that about 10% of our new deals each month now are coming from partners referred. So, so it's still smaller than I'd like, but definitely meaningful at this point.
gotcha. But to circle back, why do you? And this might just be my own bias, but we were a HubSpot adopter. We were at our agency, we a Databox client as well, but we've never spoken face to face before. But why do you think that sanctioned innovation? That was a unique term that you said earlier. Why do you? I feel there's a lot of startups that come from people that came from HubSpot. Do you think it's that kind of that culture of innovation, but they keep you kind of in a box, but they motivate you and inspire you? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, early days of HubSpot, it was very innovative. There was really only like there was very little management. You
Really?
basically had a number that you had to hit. If you were in a specific role, you had a number you had to hit, and that was almost true of like every function. Not early days of product, but later it was. And so you had a number to hit, and the other rule was use good judgment. So like there really wasn't a lot of like guardrails.
Yeah.
Now, in sales, I would get a group of leads and I was supposed to like qualify them, demo them, and close them, right? Like, so I had some process supposed to follow, but within that, there was a lot of freedom. In fact, on the first day when I showed up, I was the fourth rep. And Mark Roberge, who's the VP sales, later the CRO, he handed me like a 5-page document, which was the sales process. And I opened it up and the first page was qualification process goes here. So there's literally no qualification. To me, that's 80% of sales is qualifying. So,
Yeah.
so anyways, there wasn't a lot figured out back in the day. And so because of that, like the only culture that worked was like, go figure it out. Just don't screw it up. Right? Like Brian would literally say, don't fuck it up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give
Well, that's
general
startup
blessing.
mode, right? That's startup mode. Jump in where needed and figure it out and help the next person.
Right. And so I was so early, right? And there was so much not figured out that I got to help figure out a lot of stuff as a contributor. But then when I realized like, I could build a program here. I think I can get people to resell our product, which would be like a really efficient way for me to hit my goal and for us to grow faster. Like that, I was kind of told you can do it, but don't piss anyone off. And of course, like 3 months later, I pissed off all the VPs. But then I got in a
It
room with
happens.
Al, and he's like, it's been tough around here lately. I'm like, it has been tough around here. I start venting at him, right? He's like, well, what I'm hearing is most of the problems are coming from you. He said, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, tell me about it. And we went back and forth on it. And I'm
That's
like,
funny.
well, and like he's listening to my, reasons for why I might have been causing problems. And he's like, at the end of the meeting, he's like, you know what? I don't care as long as you keep putting your numbers.
Tell them I
um,
hit that number.
exactly. But
That's
later
funny.
on, like when you get to a few thousand people, you can't operate that way anymore, right? It's not about my brain figuring it out. It's about having a system in place that works and maybe tweaking it here and there. And a lot of stuff just had been decided, and I could see that many of those decisions were going to be baked for years. And so I just like, this just isn't my thing anymore. I don't agree with some of these things, even though it wasn't
Mhm.
like wrong, right or wrong. It was just
Right.
like I
Yeah.
want it with the
Just
way,
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, so like as a company gets bigger, innovation has to be sanctioned to some degree, right? It has to be approved. And HubSpot tried to have a process like that. Brian actually talked about it a lot publicly, where you'd have like an alpha stage and a beta stage, and then like once
Hmm.
it's out of beta, then it'd be your full-time job. And that worked for like my program and maybe like 2 other things. But it just didn't really scale. They didn't figure out how to scale that.
So let's talk about your product, Databox. What's your pitch on kind of what you guys do and what you deliver value wise to your clients?
Yeah, so like our vision is there's a world where every business decision is informed by data. That's our kind of our vision. Our mission is
Love
to
it.
empower all teams to be able to make decisions using data. And so what we have discovered through our research, through working with customers, is that most companies kind of keep a tight control over who has access to performance data. It's either in silos where like the marketing team might know what their performance is and the sales team might know what their performance is and so on, or it's at executive level and not filtered down. We've done research on this a bunch of times. Our most recent survey, we found that was it 48% of companies, I think, restrict access to financial performance data to the C-suite and owners. And then below that, like there's also restrictions on who sees the rest of the company performance. And there's so many reasons why companies do this, why owners, C-levels do this, but most companies are still operating like it's 1911, and they're still operating off of the scientific management principles, where it's, like the manager's job is to do the thinking and the people's job is to do the work. And that's like, they just haven't figured out the only way to let everybody do the thinking is to let everybody have access to the data so that they can think think in an informed way. So like that's kind of our mission, is to really make data approachable. The hard part of that is that data is hard. The numeracy, like the math version of literacy, right? Numeracy in general in the world, and especially in the US, is low. Most people are not comfortable doing relatively simple math. I'm an engineer, so I can say to me it's relatively simple math. They're not comfortable with that. They're not comfortable thinking through systems about inputs, outputs, and outcomes and putting them together and understanding correlation and relatively, again, straightforward statistical approaches to analysis. So that's our challenge, is trying to make that easy for people.
Yeah.
We've done a bunch of things to try to make that easy, and I could talk for another half hour about some of those things, but
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Well, it's a lofty goal because it isn't just a platform adoption. It's it's almost a change and shift in mindset, right? Of how you lead businesses, or how you allow people to help with your company. If I'm a decision maker for
Yeah.
a company,
Yeah.
to adopt that.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, my earlier story at HubSpot, where like I knew enough about the performance of the business, the goals of the business, the vision of the business to sit there in my job and make an observation that, marketing agencies could be resellers for us. And that would help us reduce our customer acquisition costs. And that would help us increase our growth rate. that would maybe help us improve our retention, because these marketing agencies have more incentive to make the customer or the client successful. And so I was able to observe the pain points of the marketing agencies that we could, so that we could help them, and we had a good pitch to them. But I wouldn't have never been able to make those decisions or assert that idea or introduce that idea unless I understood the dynamics of the business and what was possible. So I think, in order to enable that innovation, transparency needs to be, a number one core part of a company's culture. And it's definitely
For sure.
something that HubSpot.
Yeah,
and
because
so-
leadership could very easily could have said, no, we're not going to do that. Stay in your lane, do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very
Which
easy.
is how a lot of people lead still today.
Yeah, it is. I write about this a lot. Somebody in my comments the other day told me that they had a manager that would constantly tell them that they don't need to know that. So they'd ask a question about something, inform their own, insights or decision, or just be motivated to do something. And the boss would constantly say to her, yeah, they don't need to know that. It's not really something you need to know.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult too. It's because in my own case, like sometimes I try to be as transparent as possible about our numbers and where we're going and forecasting and our roadmap. But sometimes not everybody is built for that, right? Sometimes somebody in production is just production, right? You'd like to think that they're motivated, they're inquisitive, but a lot of times there's been people in the past where I've been optimistic about what they could bring to the table and what they could do, and maybe bring new things. And that insight of that data is a little overwhelming for some people, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. So, and maybe that's a shortcoming of mine. Did I not teach them properly? Did I not bring them along?
Yeah, no. If there's a leader if you find a leader that says, yeah, we're really transparent about their numbers and everybody in the company understands it, that's bullshit. In fact, we've analyzed it. We've done research on this, and one of the biggest impediments for companies to move to this model is that they're afraid, and they've already experienced that some of their team members just won't grasp it all. You need to understand a decent amount of finance or be willing to learn it, right? You need to understand, the importance in your business, right, of utilization and how that affects your margins and stuff like that. So it's not easy. We do a lot. So I think it's constantly putting it in front of people. It's also for new team members, it's about training them on it, introducing them to the concepts of how these are the numbers that matter in our business, and these are why, and you need to understand this because your job impacts these numbers, and that's why your job's important. And so you need to spell it out for many people. I think over time people get it, but for many people you need to really spell it out and connect, the goal of the business to their goal or to their team's goal and to their goal, so that they really see, why, really understand the work.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because we always try to be transparent. Obviously, Agents Life, it's funny you said inputs, outputs, and outcomes, because that's what we preach here. We're not just checking boxes. We're not just checking boxes for outputs. We care about the outcomes. So we have to be invested in our client success.
Absolutely.
So we talk a lot about, client KPIs and always drilling down to revenue, but I guess I'm not as transparent. You're just making me self-diagnose here a little bit. I'm sitting on a couch and you're giving me psychological advice.
I think it's hard to run an agency without being transparent. At least a small agency, because you can have a relatively small team. There's gonna be times when they really need to go up above and beyond, work extra, right, to serve a client. Is that you're gonna have a relatively small number of clients, so you got to make happy, and they have to understand the importance of process, because that's what drives efficiency and repeatability and ensuring the outcome that matters to the client. So I think it's important. There's limits. So, there's different levels of transparency, I think, that are maybe more or less necessary, but yeah, I think it's hard to run an agency without being transparent.
So bringing it back to, your role as a CEO and leadership, what are some words of advice or wisdom that you have for people that are striving to do that, or some founders that might be making the leap to do that? What guides you? Are there books? Are there mentors? Or has there been anybody that you've really leaned on during this journey yourself?
For sure. I've read so many books. If you could see the rest of the room, you'd see that there's hundreds of books stacked up on strategy and execution. I think if you're running a business, you have to be a bit of a student of running a business. You can be an expert at what you do, and you have to be an expert at what you do, right? But I think once you get to a certain size, like even being an expert at what you do might be less important than being an expert at running a business. So I highly recommend lots of lots of different books. I think one of the ones that I tell everybody to read is Blue Ocean Strategy. It's been around for a little while, but I think it's even more important to be thinking about how you differentiate yourself from competitors than it ever has been. So much competition now. There's more companies than there ever has been. There's the ability to compete across oceans that didn't exist in many industries even just 10 years ago. So there's just so much competition. There's a lot of um, and so with that competition, you really have to be zeroed in on who you serve, how you serve them differently. And I think Blue Ocean Strategy is a great book for that one. Another like slightly more advanced book on strategy would be Seven Powers. It walks through different things that you can bake into your business that are give you a long-term competitive advantage. And there's some classic ones like economy of scale, but then there's other ones that are maybe a little more newer invention, like having network effects into your business. So I think that's a great book for somebody that hasn't built a large business before and needs a framework for thinking about how to scale by building, competitive advantages into the business that are hard to do. I also just finished writing a course. In all of those books that I've read on strategy and execution, I have not found a book or a methodology that goes from strategy to execution because it misses the key step in between, which is planning. So like there are great books on execution. I would put like the EOS books, Traction there, Vern Harnish's Scaling Up, amazing book on execution. But both of them, I don't want to diss them too hard, but both of them treat strategy pretty quickly. Like in EOS, for example, it's like write down your strategy, figure out who your customer is with these two columns. There's no exercise that they walk them through. It's like you have to know that. But if you get that part wrong, if you don't understand what you're better at than your competitors and how you're serving your chosen customer base better, like all the other execution you do is just not going to have as big an impact. And so my course tries to put it all together, where we start with, creating your strategy through customer research, competitive research, understanding your internal capabilities and the market conditions, doing a SWOT analysis to figure out your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats in the market, narrowing down who your customer is so that you can then narrow down your competitive list so that you can then identify ways that you can be better and different for your customers against those competitors. And then go into the planning stage where I borrowed a lot from the OKR model, objectives and key results, where you come up with your qualitative goals or objectives for the year and match those up with key results or goals. And then go into the execution part where you need to have a cadence of operating, deciding what you're going to do, reviewing your performance, identifying what you're going to stop, start, continue, identify what you might tweak, etc. Set your goals, of course, and operate against, operate the whole team using goals. So like I've put together this course. It'll be launched the end of next week. But
that's quick. I know you've been teasing it and talking about it on your post, but end of next week, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's written. I finished writing it like a month or so ago. And then in the past, it's a free course, but in the past I've like stood in front of a camera with a teleprompter and tried to perform the course. And it's, it takes forever. Plus there's editing afterwards and all that. So this time around, we're using an AI avatar. So I recorded like enough of me talking, and then we created an avatar of me. So our videographer is basically putting the course together using a software, HeyGen. So it should be out soon.
HeyGen?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're good lead. Yep, for sure. Excellent. So what if people are tuned into this episode, they want to learn more about you, more about Databox, what are some takeaways that you want to make sure that you lead people with that have listened or watched this episode?
Yeah, don't be afraid of math. I have so many conversations with people about, and I start talking about correlations and benchmarking and modeling performance, and I can see their eyes glaze over, and then some of them will confess to me, he's like, I'm not really a numbers person. I got nervous when you started talking about that stuff, and so my my mission is just to get people to stop saying that. Stop saying you're not a numbers person. Don't. It's like you're dissing yourself. Everybody can understand numbers. You can get help to understand numbers. That's okay. But you need to, if you're in a business, whether you're the owner or somebody at the front line, you need to understand math in order to do your job as good as you can and inform and be a member of your team where you're doing beyond just your job, but helping the other people on your team and your company operate better
Yeah.
too. So yeah, don't be afraid of
Yeah.
math.
I used to have a professor. He always talked about math because I was engineering as well, and
Oh,
he
you're
always said math is the universal language, and it just teaches critical thinking. Because no
yes,
matter where you come from in the world, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. There has to be critical thinking once you get to elevated levels of how
yeah,
to figure things out. And right, there might be one solution, but there could be 200 different ways to get there. And
that's
you
right.
just need to figure out the best way to get there. So yeah, he used to always preach that to us. And
Yeah,
it was just because it just came easy to me. That's what I gravitated to as well. And for us, it's always odd because I tell people I was an engineering background and I started an agency, and they're like, "What does
yeah. What are
math
you
and,
doing?
and engineering have to do with an agency?" But I always
Yeah,
start with we data's at our core, and I believe that everything with marketing and advertising should start with data. So you're preaching, I'm on
yeah,
your side with all this.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's funny. It's somewhere in high school, I think people sort themselves into one or the other bucket, and maybe that was fine 30 years ago, but 40 years ago, but today,
yeah,
it,
yeah,
yeah, marketing, sales, all that stuff is very numbers driven. You have to
for sure.
understand math to do the work.
Yep,
And I
yep,
think selling things even now, you have to do math with your customers, your prospects, to help them think
yeah.
through the pros and cons of working with you. So
Yeah. And
I
like
think
you
it's
said,
important.
it makes you have to come up with a systematic approach, right? Because Matthew, you just don't jump in. Sometimes with creative, you
Right.
talk to creative people and they just dive in head first and they just do it.
Yeah.
But in my experience is when you have a process and when you have some systematic approach to what you're going to do, and I think
Yeah.
that math teaches that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, no, it's a
Yeah.
combination. I love writing. I write a lot, and then I garden. Like I do flower perennial gardening, and then I play soccer. And all of those enable a level of creativity where you can, if you have a base understanding of things, you can just go do stuff. You don't really have to plan it out. That is my outlet for my creativity. But when I'm at work, I try to think very methodically. I'm like, all right, what's the investment? What's the expected result? How are we going to get there? What are the steps? How will we know whether we're on track through leading indicators, right? Like, try to be very methodical about it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, Pete, I appreciate you being on. Can you let everybody know where to follow you and Databox at to learn more
Yeah,
about the
sure.
course that's coming out as well as the great content you guys are doing?
Yeah, man. So I publish daily on LinkedIn. So if somebody wants to Google my name, Peter Caputa, I am the fourth. My son is also now on LinkedIn. He started his own business. But Peter
Nice.
Caputa the fourth, IV, if you want to make sure. You should be able to differentiate. I do software. My son does car detailing. But so I'm on LinkedIn. And then for the course, if you just Google predictable scale, you'll find the waiting list, which will turn into the landing page when it's live. So
Great. Well, Pete, thanks for being on. I appreciate you dropping some dimes and all this content and knowledge for our listeners. Everybody, stick around. More content to come. Subscribe. Stay tuned. Thanks, Pete.